The oldest daughter wound is something that I would like to go deeper on, as I've been talking about the firstborn daughter. I've realized in my counseling and in my journey with people that family roles that we take on as children often stick with us throughout our lives as we grow and mature into adults without us being aware of the conditioning of the house that we grow up in, the culture, and the didactics of that family. They often frame the mindset of children, firstborns, particularly the firstborn daughter. We talk about the firstborn syndrome, meaning that the first has a precedence to set up. And the firstborn daughters of the family, as I've shared on numerous videos, go through different didactics. She is the backbone of the family, the firstborn daughter. The third parent for the siblings, the firstborn daughter. A matriarch in training, the firstborn daughter. Being a firstborn daughter is like being an unpaid internship for the rest of your life. I want to introduce a concept that I've called EDS. It is the firstborn daughter syndrome, EDS. It's a term coined to describe the unique pressures and responsibilities placed on the firstborn daughter by their families. Now, this term is not actually a professional term. It is not an official mental health diagnosis, but it's a term that we coin to literally describe the pathology, to describe the character formation of a firstborn by the pressures that are put on the family. And it is pressures like being the more domestic labor responsible sibling than the others. That is, she's the one that does the cooking. She's the one that does the co-parenting of the siblings on behalf of the parents. She's the one in some instances that wakes up the other siblings even when they are going to school. You see that firstborns are parentified in the trajectory, and so this happens subliminally, but there's a very vivid, lubricant feel and manifestation in the holistic character. You know, they do the laundry and they do that. It's like the lion's share of the family is dumped on the firstborn daughter or the eldest daughter. That is the pathology. That is what we call EDS syndrome, EDSS syndrome, the eldest daughter syndrome. I want you to follow me on this journey that I'm going to give you as I deal with the EDS syndrome, the firstborn daughter wound. You might be a firstborn daughter and you might not understand the comprehensive nature of the office that you have. It is not a curse, it is an office. The other thing about firstborn is that they are held at a very higher standard than the other siblings. They are expected to do more. The pressure of doing well at school, the pressure of doing well at other extracurricular programs, the pressure to be an example to the siblings that are coming before her. And after that, she goes back home and she has to take care of the other siblings. She has to do other co-parenting issues that are beyond her, but she automatically finds herself transitioned by this position of the firstborn syndrome or the first syndrome, the firstborn syndrome, which is a precedence. You find that they are responsible for the emotional caretaking business, the emotional caretaking business of the family. She becomes the mediator when it comes to family conflict. She's the mediator. She is the one that stands in between the gap whenever there is family conflict. They are responsible for the emotional caretaking or expected to mediate conflict between other members of the family. That is the firstborn daughter syndrome. They become adults before they're adults. One of the major pathologies of being a firstborn daughter is abdicated childhood. You have an abdicated childhood or an abducted childhood. Your childhood is abducted and you don't experience being a child. You become an adult too early and you've got childhood gaps because you never really got to be a child. You were given responsibilities and you became a co-parent by default, by family default settings. And that becomes something very difficult. Most of the times they are treated as a friend of the parents instead of being a child. This is what I call abducted childhood. Most of the time, if you look at firstborn daughters, they are like a sister to the mother. They are like a sister to the father. They are like the lateral relating dynamic is like friend to friend than parent. So she literally does not know how to be a parent to the parent because of this EDS, eldest daughter syndrome. Most of the time they are treated as that, and it's very unfortunate. And most of the time they do not have boundaries because they are exposed to vandalized boundaries between the parent and the child. Putting it in layman's English, most oftentimes the boundaries between parent and child don't exist. They are vandalized. As a result, they don't have boundaries themselves when they grow up. And they find it very difficult to establish boundaries when they grow up. They don't have the healthy, normal boundaries between a parent and a child. Those were taken away early. That is the reality of an eldest born daughter. And they are talked to and engaged with as though they are equals with the parent. That is a pathology. And that is the reality of a firstborn daughter. The eldest daughter may develop certain personality traits and mental personality traits that cause them to struggle as adults or relating to adults. They can become chronic pleasers, chronic people pleasers, overachievers. These are character defaults of a firstborn daughter. This is very important that we catch it, we understand, we diagnose it, because in everything that is good, there is something that is a weakness. So this is my introduction to the eldest daughter wound. These are the pathologies. These are the devices that cause them to bleed in strange places. These are the conditionings, the blueprints that cause them to have dysfunctional relational patterns. These are the vices that cause firstborn daughters to be too heavy for certain men. These are the conditionings that cause firstborn daughters to feel like they are capable. I want you to follow this as we go deeper. I'm going to give you the 8 most common signs of eldest daughter syndrome in dealing with the eldest daughter wound. In our journey of healing the eldest daughter, we are dealing with the eldest daughter wound. And I just introduced a coined therapeutic code, EDS, eldest daughter syndrome, which is the character formation of a first daughter as a result of the pressures that she goes through in the family that ends her to adopt certain personality traits. We call that the eldest daughter syndrome. And it's a pathology. It is not a curse. When I use the word curse, I'm not saying that in its etymological expression it's a curse, but in its play out, it begins to have some limiting factors. Everything good is something bad. These are the downsides of being an eldest daughter syndrome. I keep saying that they are cut from a different cloth. I want to give you the 8 most common signs of eldest daughter syndrome, and I want you to deal with them and to be aware of them. The first common sign of an eldest daughter syndrome is intense feeling of responsibility. Intense feeling of responsibility. You are just pressured, and you always constantly have intense feeling of responsibility. And this isn't regular childhood responsibility. That actually can be healthy, like doing your homework, making your bed, and doing all those kinds of things. But this is adult responsibility. This is what we call abducted childhood, whereby you are literally feeling responsible for your siblings, the family. You are putting the family first and other people first. And these intense feelings of responsibility have nothing to do with your own self-satisfaction, your own self-life. It's always the crucifixion of the self to resurrect the other. So this is an intense feeling of responsibility. It is the result of parentification. years and years and years and years of you getting the chores of a parent. You've got childhood gaps. You never became a child. And therefore, it becomes very difficult for you to be the child in the hand of your spouse. You become too heavy, too controlling, too judgmental. And you can look like you are tough and hard on the outside when inside you don't have the vocabulary to ask for help. You don't have the internal wiring for you to be vulnerable because of this parentification. This leads mostly to firstborn daughters rejecting parents in others because they never got to experience a parent. They were a friend to their parents, they were co-parents, or they were third parents to their siblings. Because of this, you constantly, perpetually live in the area or the vicinity of intense feelings of responsibility. And I think that this is too much pressure. And you have to be aware of this before we change it. Remember, before we say there's something wrong with you, we are dealing with the conditioning that you went through that leads you to this particular character trait that you begin to have. So most of these firstborns, they don't know how to receive the love of a parent because they never were children to parents. They were partners to parents. So now you've got this perpetual, intense feeling of responsibility. The second syndrome of an eldest daughter syndrome is that you tend to be an overachiever type A, an overachiever type A, and very driven. An overachiever type A, and very driven. It can be good, but to be honest, when you investigate the motive for this particular character trait, it comes from a conditioning of carrying a burden that you do not have a vocabulary. You are not able to decode the weight of being a parent. So it gives you this trait because you always felt you had to be a good role model to your siblings. You had to set an example. You had to be everything. And you were the first experimental relationship of your parents in being a parent. So you're literally an experiment in the laboratory of parenthood, where your parents are literally experimenting what to do and what not to do on a child. So you are overachievers type A and are very driven. You think that the only way to get love and achieve it is to earn it. And if it's given to you without earning it, you can't receive it. If someone gives you a compliment and you feel you don't deserve that compliment, you have a hard time accepting it, decoding it. So you will find a way to reject it or not to register because you say that the only way to receive anything, to receive love, is for you to earn it. If someone gives you a compliment that you feel like you never earned, you brush it off or you minimize its effect on you. It is an eldest daughter wound, EDS, eldest daughter syndrome. The third character trait that I'm going to give you, the third most common sign of EDS, is a lot of anxiety or uncontrollable worry. You have the curse of anxiety and uncontrollable worry due to the fact that you were always expected to be thinking about the well-being of your sibling and the family. You therefore have default factory settings to live in anxiety and uncontrollable worry. You are always living at the edge and you find it very difficult for you to relax because you are constantly thinking it's misplaced responsibility that robbed you of your childhood, abducted childhood, that has led you to live in this neighborhood of anxiety and uncontrollable worry. These are critical points to deal with as we continue dealing with the 8 most common signs of EDS syndrome. We are continuing with the 8 signs of EDSD, that eldest daughter syndrome. 8 signs that you have the eldest daughter syndrome. And I've been talking about it because of the curse of conditioning, the plague of abducted childhood parentification that causes you to adopt certain character traits that work against you and that tend to lead you to isolate you from a loving relationship with people that can experience your authentic self. You are trapped in the prison of your experiential self that you never really taste the authentic you. The fourth symptom of EDSD is that you struggle, or firstborn daughters struggle with chronic people pleasing. Firstborn daughters struggle with chronic people pleasing. Again, because you've been told you are responsible for others in the family, you always find yourself putting others first. Always. You are always putting others first, considering others first. And sometimes pleasing people is the only way that you feel fulfilled, because your life is a crucifixion of for the benefit of others except yourself. So because of that, always feeling like it's your job to keep everybody happy, always feeling like it's your job to carry everybody. People pleasing is always their way of dealing with their anxiety. They do that people pleasing because it's a therapeutic coping system for them to literally deal with their anxiety. The urge comes from the need to get attention by putting others first. That's where it comes from. When we investigate it, it comes from the need of getting attention. And therefore, sometimes, by always considering others first and crucifying themselves, they find a somehow sordid way of self gratification, because all their lives they believe that for them to get attention, they have to earn it. For them to get love, they have to earn it. So it's very difficult for them to receive love from a man that they feel like they've not earned. So they must always be in control. I found this, and this is my concept, that one of the greatest defects in love languages of a firstborn daughter is that their love language is they have to be in control to feel like they are in love or they are loved. Therefore, if they are not in control, they don't feel or decode or register love. The fifth syndrome of EDSD, or eldest daughter wound, is that they have a hard time placing and upholding boundaries. They have a hard time placing and upholding boundaries. Now, this is definitely connected to the people pleasing trait that I just discussed. Now, it's connected to that, it's interconnected to that, but it deserves its own, in that the struggle comes from the fact that firstborn daughters, when they are growing up, they did not get to have established boundaries. Healthy boundaries between a child and a parent were never established between them. Broken, vandalized boundaries is the vicinity that they lived in. They were exposed to carrying roles that they were not built for, or either had the vocabulary for. So they never had that. Their parent-child didactic does not exist. They are co-parents, the third parent, matriarchs in training, abducted childhood. And because of that, they have this. They have issues of establishing boundaries between parent and child, boundaries between spouse and spouse. They don't have that. And most of the time, men will complain that you are babying them, or you're treating them like a baby, or you're talking to them like a baby. It's because you've always been in control. And when you enter into a relationship where you have to surrender control, because this is my true definition of love. A man receives respect from a woman. And when he receives that respect, he decodes it as love. In order for a woman to completely love a man, she has got to literally surrender. And surrender is literally the didactic or the transmission cable by which a man registers love. And that is the firstborn daughter's greatest challenge, to surrender that, because boundaries have been destroyed and they're blurred. Boundaries and self-care is something that they do not do well because of parentification. This is a very, very red flag, very green flag, very blue flag trait of boundaries. And I want to talk about the sixth syndrome of a firstborn daughter wound or syndrome. And that is the one that of feeling resentful over their families. When you listen to firstborn daughters, they have an embedded resentment towards their family, because they feel like they've crucified all their life and they were never accepted. They feel like the siblings got away with things that they never ever were able to get away with. The last born gets away with things that she was not allowed to get away with. The other siblings seem to get spoiled and get access and get opportunities and get things over which she sacrificed. So this is an unarticulated resentment, and there's nothing wrong with you. If you are a firstborn, I mean, I've been looking at the comments on that you've been sending. Many of you guys are very frustrated at being firstborns. Others are happy. Others are crying. Others have given up on men. But this is the parentification, this is the conditioning, this is the cooking pot that has made you this way because of the pressure and responsibility of household labor, which was never a choice. You never had a choice. It was imposed. It was not an issue of a choice. You start to feel like you resent the members of the family that benefited from the contributions that you made at your detriment. And others are literally progressing in places where you are regressing because you poured out, you gave out something that worked for them, and now you realize that you are devoid of the things that you gave away. You poured yourself out until you ran out of the substance to point to your own self. And therefore, the resentment that comes is out of your contribution. It is naturally upsetting. You are a human being. You are not crazy. You are not mad. You have to process and locate where you are as a firstborn. When the parents allow other siblings to get away with things that you didn't have an opportunity to experience, when they have that, as a human, the inner child in you and the psychic in you will rise up, and you tend to have that resentment. The burden of premature responsibility can lead to feelings of unfairness, and the unmet childhood needs always remain an emotional vacuum that echoes in your adult life. That unmet childhood need is a gap because you never got to be a child. You never got to be a child, and that echoes everywhere, and that comes out as a curse, a pathological pattern, a sequence that follows you as if you chose to be that way. You cannot give what you do not receive. And many of them have a hard time dealing with their daughters because some of you, your mother called you a sister. Some of you are raised up by your grandmother. It does not matter the relational dynamic, but what I've observed when it comes to firstborn daughters, EDS, eldest daughter syndrome, it is literally a pathology that requires us to give attention in our time. You know, the weight of adult responsibilities coupled with the absence of age appropriate guidance and nurturing can cause resentment and bitterness. You are not crazy, you are human. You are not evil, you are human. You have to give yourself permission to feel. If you are feeling this way, do not feel like a bad person. You need to get counseling. Continue watching as we continue this amazing journey of the 8 symptoms of eldest daughter syndrome. We are dealing with the 8 symptoms of eldest daughter syndrome under the series Eldest Daughter Wound. And I'm saying that it's okay to be a firstborn daughter feeling. It's okay. You cannot heal from what you don't admit. And the reason I'm dealing with this cycle is because when I originally started the firstborn series, it was just on the types of firstborns. Then we began to literally tap on the firstborn daughter, which in African context has not been given much attention because of patriarchy, even with others. I'm talking about the 8 symptoms that follow an eldest daughter syndrome. And the 7th syndrome of a person or a woman that suffers from eldest daughter syndrome is that you struggle with feelings of guilt. I've seen that eldest daughters struggle with feelings of guilt. They feel guilty for having a good time. They feel guilty for putting themselves first. They feel guilty for literally buying something for them. They feel guilty. Guilty for allowing themselves to process their feelings. Guilt is a very common emotion for them. They feel guilty for wanting their own lives. They feel guilty for literally being authentic instead of being experiential. Most firstborn daughters, they stay close to home so that they can always take care of the family. You realize that as a pattern. They stay close to home. They'll get a job to work outside the country, outside the continent, and they will start making reasons. Who will take care of my father? What will happen with my siblings? That is the firstborn. They have a chronic feeling of guilt. And even if they have a party, and if she's at a party or they host a party, instead of enjoying the party themselves, you realize that they are overly concerned that other people are having a good time, but they never assess if they are having a good time themselves because they never put themselves first. And whenever they do, they will feel guilty. They feel guilty for expressing themselves. So most of them, they bottle, or most of them, they come to strange conclusions. They'll say that I've given up on dating. I've given up on men. Those are the statements that are made from a firstborn that is bleeding in strange places. This is an EDSD. This is an EDSD syndrome. a firstborn daughter syndrome, an eldest daughter syndrome, and you've got to heal. You've got to heal. If you don't heal, you'll bleed on strange places. If you don't heal as an eldest daughter, you'll bleed on your post. And that's something that we do not want to happen. And finally, I want to give you the last symptom of an eldest daughter syndrome. This is difficulty in adult relationships. Most firstborn daughters' relationships sucks. They are prone to divorce. They are prone to be exiled relationally to the island of isolation because they conclude that nobody can handle them. They conclude that they are social, relational misfits, or no one else is good enough for their standards. This is a symptom of eldest daughters. Due to all the traits I've stated, they find it difficult to form happy adult relationships with other older people or men. They struggle with men relationships. This is an old age pathology, eldest daughter syndrome, and it will often show itself up in adult relationships. Most of your adult relationship as an eldest daughter betray your conditioning. They betray the unarticulated blueprint. First, you may be seen as a mother over your friend group. If you've got a group of friends, you tend to mother everybody. You are the one who checks if everybody arrived safely after a party. You are the one who checks if everybody is happy. You are always planning activities, ensuring that everyone gets home safely and never lose or never get hurt except yourself. You automatically play the maternal pattern. You automatically play the mother figure over your friends, over your group, over your associations. You take control. That's you. If you're having a party, you're always concerned that everyone is having a good time. So much so that you forget to ask yourself, are you enjoying the party yourself? You fed everybody else only to realize that the party ended and you never ever ate a plate of food. That is actually an EDSD, eldest daughter syndrome. You are the one who all your friends, all your cliques, they come to you when they have a problem. But you realize that you have no one to go to when you have a problem yourself. You are solving other people's problems. But when you literally realize that you need someone to talk to, someone to connect to, someone to cry to, a shoulder to lean on, there's nothing. You are everybody's hero, but you ain't got no hero yourself. That is EDS, eldest daughter syndrome. You've got to heal from this. When it comes to romantic relationships, you find yourself with someone who does not have the capacity to connect with you at your level. And because of that, you baby them. You carry them, but they can't carry you. And that becomes literally an emotional prison. You become a prisoner of hope. You literally come to the conclusion that they are no men for you because you taste like a man yourself. You behave like a man. You provide like a man. And when it comes to making hard decisions, oftentimes you are the one that makes all the hardest decisions. You struggle to express your needs and desires, which hinders you in the dimension of communication. And this leads to unmet expectations and potential relational strain because you are bleeding in strange places. You do not know how to articulate what you need. You always know how to decode and catch the frequency of your spouse, but your spouse never really connects with you at your level because you've literally imprisoned yourself in the island of mutation. This is a weakness. You end up hating being a firstborn. I've been seeing the comments. I hate being a firstborn. It ain't easy. It's because of the conditioning, and it's also because of the life sentence that you have accepted yourself. You can't ask for help, and oftentimes you do not know how to even receive it when it is given. This is the EDSD. The firstborn daughter syndrome is more than just an issue of being parentified. It's an issue that we have to deal with. Our generation has been given permission to speak. And I know that what I'm speaking now, our fathers and mothers and people that came from different generations were not able to speak that. But because of the nature of our information age, we've been given, this generation has been given permission to speak. And when you don't speak, you die. And it's time for you as a firstborn daughter to speak. The first way to realize that you have EDS, eldest daughter syndrome, is to diagnose the fact that 77% of firstborns have this syndrome and they have got to literally get help. Most eldest daughters are single or divorced. That's a pathology. That is the cancer that affects their relationships after they've been cooked in the pot of family. I wish that you can get counseling and realize that there's nothing wrong with you. You have got to locate yourself in the vicinity of where you are and then begin to challenge and tell yourself the uncomfortable truth. True healing begins when you are willing to tell yourself the uncomfortable truth. Then and then start to engage on a journey to finding the inner child. And when you begin to give your inner child permission to speak, permission to be heard, you begin to parent your inner child by giving yourself what you gave to your siblings, giving yourself everything you gave to everybody else, and also apologizing on behalf of your parents. This is your Black Bishop. I believe that healing is key for all of us. For all of us have wounds in different areas. Heal the inner child before you give yourself to someone else or